Thank you, everyone. Please be seated. So, welcome to today's full council meeting, and in particular, welcome to members of the public who are attending in the public gallery, those who are watching next door, and also those who are watching this meeting via our YouTube channel. For those in the building, I would like to draw your attention to the emergency evacuation procedure. Please leave the chamber by the nearest exit and congregate by the cathedral. As with any council meeting, please treat each other with due courtesy, tolerance, and respect. Agenda item 2 is apologies for absence. I have received apologies from Councillors Bartle, Breckles, Fraser, Freeman, Hance, Hucker, Malik, Pete, Tate, and Thomas. Is that correct, and are there any others? Thank you. Agenda item 3 is declarations of interest. Can I ask whether any councillors have any interest to declare regarding the items on today's agenda? Thank you. Agenda item 4 is minutes of the previous meeting. I move that the minutes of the previous meeting of full council held on the 8th of October 2024 be agreed as a correct record. Do I have a seconder?
I second that, the minutes and reserve my own remarks, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wilcox. So can I take it the minutes are agreed? Aye. Thank you. Agenda item 5 is Lord Mayor's business. Council notes the sad news that Alderman Michael Withers has passed away. Michael was elected as councillor for Stockwood in 1965 and also represented Bishopston from 1973 to 1988. He was a trustee of several voluntary organisations such as St Peter's Non-Ecclesiastical Charities and was founding chairman of the British Anglo-German Society. I would now like to ask Councillor Richard Eddy to say a few words in remembrance. Councillor Eddy.
Thank you. I suspect very few of us in this chamber will recall Alderman Michael Withers. Michael recently died at the grand old age of 93. As the Lord Mayor's remarked, he served between 1965 and 88 as councillors for Stockwood and then for Bishopston. Although Michael was a lifelong Conservative, he was originally elected as a member of the Citizens Party before 74. Tories and Liberals in Bristol stood as part of this Citizens Party. I suspect the Liberals had some influence with the label we used here. Naturally, members might have preferred me to label it the Subjects Party, of course. Michael got Alderman Peter Abraham, who served half a century here until 91, involved in local politics, first by offering his home as a polling day committee room, secondly by standing as a candidate with him. At Peter's funeral in June, Michael said, only half-jokingly, "You could say I am responsible for getting Peter to stand as a Conservative." Stockwood Ward back in the 1960s was vast and challenging. At the heart of South Bristol's growing suburbs, it ranged from Stockwood proper through Hengrave and Whitchurch to Hartcliffe's Bishport 5 high-rise flats. As Lord Mayor remarked, Michael actively championed good Anglo-German relations. He was the founder chairman of the City's Anglo-German Society and a very committed member of the Bristol-Hanover Council, which ran twinning between the two cities. To found that society in 1948 just after the last war, when both cities endured a lot of hardship from one another's air forces, was quite an achievement and testimony to actually good reconciliation. To those of us privileged to know him well, Michael was gregarious, sociable, and a very keen raconteur. I recall a visit to the Palace of Westminster, hosted by Lord Stockton, Harold Macmillan's grandson, and a local MEP. During the tour, we bumped into Michael Withers, leading his own party around along. Alexander Stockton said to me, "Michael Withers is in this place more often than I am." That was half said in jest, I guess, and partly in irritation. We send our prayers and thoughts to Michael's wife Jill and to his children Helen and Julian and their families for a life lived well. And we give our thanks for Alderman Withers' keen contribution to the city he loved.
Thank you, Councillor Eddy. Council also notes the sad news that civil rights campaigner Dr. Paul Stevenson, OBE, has recently passed away. Dr. Stevenson famously spearheaded the Bristol bus boycott, which overturned a ban on people from ethnic minorities working on buses, and was instrumental in the creation of the Race Relations Act. He was a tireless campaigner for equality and social justice. He was awarded an OBE in 2009, honorary degrees and doctorates, the Freedom of the City of Bristol, and a Pride of Britain Award in 2017. His example was an inspiration to this city, this country, and the whole world. I'd like to ask each of the parties to say a few words in his memory, starting first with Councillor Tom Bernard to speak on behalf of the Labour Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I rise to pay tribute to Paul Stevenson, a giant of Bristol who dedicated his life to fighting for justice. Paul was truly one of Bristol's best. Paul, alongside the other leading members of Bristol Bus Boycott, who we honoured with the Freedom of the City last year, made a lasting impact not only on Bristol but on Britain. The Bristol Bus Boycott was a courageous act, which I hope will inspire people to be more like Paul. The message of the boycott is powerful, one which will have significance for generations. If you see an injustice in the world, take a stand and lead the change. I would also like to pay tribute to the people of Bristol who participated in the boycott, as we wouldn't have had brought about this change without Paul's actions, nor without solidarity from his fellow Bristolians. Whilst the boycott is monumental in of itself, the consequences of the boycott were truly a landmark moment in the history of Britain. The attention they brought to racial discrimination in Bristol paved the way for the Race Relations Acts, which in effect outlawed public racial discrimination in the UK. This was one of the most consequential pieces of legislation in our history and a key foundation towards making us the fair, inclusive society we want Britain to be. And it's worth remembering some historical poetry. The Bristol Omnibus Company's racist employment practices were lifted on the same day that Martin Luther King delivered his I Have a Dream speech. Now, to many, this may seem like a long time ago, and it was broadcast in black and white after all. That's not really the case, because there's still people around today who would have personally known Paul. And it's a reminder of how far we have come in a relatively short amount of time. The commonplace practices he stood against then will be unanimously seen as repugnant now, and I think we can take great reassurance from that. Paul was a key figure in bringing this sorely needed change about, and we cannot show enough gratitude for that. A tireless campaigner who devoted his life to making Bristol a more equitable city. And of course, Paul's activism didn't stop at the boycott. Refusing to leave the Bay Horse after not being served because he was black further drew attention to injustices facing Bristol's black community. And whilst there is still further to go, communities across Bristol can count on Bristol Labour to listen and demonstrate effective allyship. You cannot help but admire Paul's steadfast commitment to the cause. Again, I would like to thank Paul for standing up for what he knew to be right. Rest in peace, Paul Stevenson. Bristol is forever in your debt.
Thank you. I'd now like to call on Councillor Joss Clark to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat Group.
Thank you. Thank you, my Lord Mayor. When people talk about Bristol, words like edgy, alternative, vibrant, and willing to do the right thing are often used. And it makes me proud, a proud Bristolian, to know that there are those in our city who have had the bravery and courage to stand up for what is right and to devote their lives to righting a universal wrong. And Paul Stevenson was that man. And although he was not born or brought up in Bristol, I think it is right that we claim him as our own and remember his courage and tenaciousness to change race relations for the good of everyone. I had the privilege to meet Paul on a couple of occasions, first in 2007, when he was granted the Freedom of the City, being the first black person to receive the honour. The citation stated Paul Stevenson had devoted his life to improving race relations and encouraging community involvement, and is a founder member of the Bristol Black Archives Project, which has contributed greatly to an understanding of the history of this city and has helped to build closer relations between all the communities of Bristol. It was also fitting that the other members of the West Indian Development Council were honoured with the Freedom of the City in 2022. And my second memory of meeting him was on the 20th of October 2020, when Great Western Railway named one of their intercity express trains in Paul's honour at a ceremony at Bristol Temple Mead Station. And as the Lord Mayor at the time, I attended the ceremony on behalf of the city. Before I finish, I would like to suggest that if you are not familiar with his work and achievements, take a little time to research him when you have a moment. It is fascinating. So speaking personally, I feel really honoured to say that I have met a truly inspirational and pioneering gentleman who was so brave and courageous. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
And now Councillor Mark Weston to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The danger, of course, of speaking at this point is a lot of the comments have already been made. No, you're fine. I'll ignore these bits. I think I recently lost my father, so I've been thinking a bit about what happens when you lose someone you love. And I think when you're on your deathbed, when your life is flashing before your eyes, when you're looking back on all your achievements, you want to have a life of meaning. You want to have a life that mattered. You want to know that you'll be remembered, that you made a difference. And I think that sort of speaks to the human soul as to what we all want. We all want to know that we will be remembered. We want to know and be associated with remarkable acts. And Paul Stevenson did that. Now, I would imagine if you talk to his family, there's those family moments, those golden moments that you share with kids and grandkids and everything else. But to us here in this chamber who didn't know him quite like the family, it's his actions in racial equality that speak to us. It's the actions that matter most that drove that change that many of us today take for granted. We don't live in a perfect world. We know there is still racism there. It is, should we say, somewhat less overt than it was. But when Paul was there in the 60s, it was straight in your face. You couldn't go in certain places. You couldn't do certain things. And Paul changed that. To think about the achievement of that, he mattered. He mattered to those that never met him, probably those people that never even heard about him, but his actions will have impacted each and every one of those. So I'm not going to talk about the trains that were named after him or anything else. And from my point of view, he matters to all of us, whether we knew him personally or we didn't, because the city we are in now was a direct consequence and helped be shaped by his and the other bus boycott campaigners' actions. That is a remarkable achievement. So if Paul is watching down now, from my group, from all of us, you led a tremendous life. You affected people that will never know your name, but will be permanently indebted to your actions. I am very grateful to have met him. A life well lived. He will be remembered. Thank you.
And finally, I'd like to ask Councillor Lorraine Francis to speak on behalf of the group.
Members and members of the public. What can I say? Mr. Paul Stevenson, we have a say in our tradition. Sunrise, that's when you were born, 6th of May 1937, and sunset, 2nd of November 2024. He was a scholar, activist, author, social worker, so I resonate with him and other members of the bus boycott who were also social workers, Mr. Bailey. Thinking back to when Paul was born back in 1937, he was actually born in Essex in the UK. He was not born in the Caribbean. And so that makes him quite unique to some degree. He was in the Air Force as well, so some of you may not know that. So that's where my notes end. I just wanted to ensure that we had some sort of factual understanding of who this man was. So I stand before you all as a black woman, and from the Caribbean, my parents originated from the Caribbean, coming into the country in the early 1960s, prior to the bus boycott taking place. So we all grew up in, well, I'm not that old, but we all grew up in a time when racism was prevalent. And I see racism as an amoeba, because it moves and it changes shape. It doesn't stay stagnant. So whilst Paul and the other core members of the boycott challenged Bristol Bus Company, as it was at the time, the racism still permeates all different levels of society, and we're still facing inequalities, and we're still facing health inequalities as well. So Paul paved the way, as did many members of the bus boycott back in the 1960s. And we know about Rosa Parks earlier. And so we have a tradition in fighting to address inequalities. And Paul's platform over his lifetime was to fight inequalities and racism in order to make the world a better place. As we move forward with this brief tribute to him, I am assured by the council that a lot more will be done to honour this gentleman who did a lot for tackling inequalities within this city, inequalities that still persist. He has children, and they are very vibrant and also following in his legacy. I hope that we don't assume that inequalities have disappeared, but what we do have and was left with was a legacy about challenging and never give up, and always having that indomitable spirit that drives us forward. So as a councillor standing in the chambers today, I hope that I imbued some of those characteristics, and as we move forward, we will have a city that is fairer for all, and that we can make this council a better place to sit for all residents as we sit in the committee system. Paul would be really proud of us if he was here to see us progress. So I thank you all, members of the public, for being present. I thank the Lord Mayor for allowing us to have this proper based tribute for today, and I look forward to us developing something that we, as 72 councillors in the chambers, can be proud of. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Francis. I'd now like to invite full council to observe a minute's silence. Thank you very much, everybody. Okay, moving on. I'd now like to invite the Leader of the Council, Councillor Tony Dyer, to make a statement on the Government's autumn budget. Councillor Dyer.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Over the past 6 months, we have seen some significant political change for Bristol. We now have the first Labour government in 14 years, 2 new MPs, including Bristol's first Green MP, and 3 new cabinet ministers in key areas of government: finance, climate change and health. I congratulate all of our new 5 MPs on their new roles, and I look forward to continuing to work with them for the benefit of our city and beyond. We have also seen a shift in the city's political balance, with the Green Party now becoming the largest group in the council and myself becoming the first Green leader of a core city. On top of this, the new cross-party committees give a level of decision-making power to each of us, individually and collectively, and that we have not experienced in the last 12 years. My party had said pre-election that whatever the outcome of the election, we would, if in a position to do so, share power proportionally. And I am therefore grateful to the Liberal Democrat group for stepping up and taking policy committee chair positions alongside my Green colleagues. I am thankful too for the participation of all members across all groups in taking on roles on policy committees as members and vice chairs. And we should not forget the contribution members also make in their roles on regulatory and other committees. The work done now is vital to the daily running of the council and therefore our city. It is in this spirit of cross-party working where the seeds lay for the future health of our local democracy. And in this spirit, I have also shared this speech with party group leaders beforehand, and I look forward to hearing their response. My Lord Mayor, it is clear that trust in politicians and the political process in our city isn't anywhere as good as it could and should be. I say to my colleagues on the benches today that we must work hard to earn this trust by listening to residents often and intently to help shape our decisions. That includes those who reach out to us, including those in the public gallery today, but more importantly, those who are underrepresented in this chamber or feel that for whatever reason they cannot make their voices heard. This whole council must actively seek those voices out to inform our decision making. It is now 6 months since I was appointed leader of the council. As leader, my priorities remain to ensure that decisions are made as transparently, honestly, and equitably as possible. Given the challenges that we face, we must focus on getting the basics right and providing the best frontline services for the most vulnerable in Bristol. As we all know, I have taken up this role at an incredibly difficult time for local authorities across the country. 6 months into this administration, the challenges have become clearer, and with the new Chancellor of the Exchequer delivering her first budget speech, this seemed an appropriate time to respond both to that speech and to talk about the Council's challenges and our hopes and ambitions for the future. Whilst I welcome the Government's commitment to multi-year settlements from 2026, 2027 onwards, for this year we will receive another single-year settlement. And whilst there are strong indications of some additional funding for key services, including for special education needs, adult social care and housing, we won't fully know how much we will receive until the local government financial settlement is published around Christmas time. However, I do believe that it would be more than the mouldy old Satsuma local government has become accustomed to in recent years. We do already know, however, that it won't be enough to cover the black hole we are facing. I urge all members, and especially my Labour colleagues, to keep up pressure on the government for increased funding for local authorities. In the meantime, we still have to balance our budget. If we do not, then our ability to do so will be taken out of our hands, and anything that is not a statutory requirement will be at risk. To do this, firstly, we must tackle our in-year deficit, not only in the general fund, where we still have a gap of almost 20 million, due to failure of previous administrations to deliver in-year savings, but also in our housing revenue account and in the dedicated SCURS grant. Therefore, strict internal spending controls will need to remain in place, and we continue to closely monitor delivery of savings, key projects, and our transformation programme. This is vital to ensure we are in the right position as a council to not only tackle the fiscal challenges that have been identified, but to ensure that we can deliver vital services effectively to the standards that people need. Another legacy issue left to us is the council's failure to keep pace with changing housing standards, in which we are not alone. Our council tenants should expect the highest standards from us as a landlord, and I take this responsibility incredibly seriously. Good progress has been made already, but a lot more still needs to be done. And at the same time as we improve our own housing stock, we will continue to look at all ways of delivering social housing to both reduce our housing waiting lists and reduce our costs. My Lord, one of the other things, my Lord Mayor, sorry, that's next week. One of the key things we must do as a council is learn from other authorities, especially those that are proving to be more effective than us in their delivery of vital service areas. By working collaboratively, we will be able to identify areas for improvement where we can both deliver better services whilst reducing costs. So we will continue to work in partnership with other local authorities, including our sister core cities, and vitally with our neighbouring authorities in England and in Wales. We will also continue to work across the West of England area to ensure that the Mayor Combined Authority does not continue to miss out on further opportunities to bring investment into our area. The English devolution white paper will be published in December, and combined authorities will play a vital role. We cannot afford to be left out of that devolution process. Above all, we are ready and willing to work with the new government in a positive and collaborative manner. I also expect the government to work with us as well, to take on board our input where we are the relevant authority or have the relevant expertise. And finally, my Lord Mayor, sometimes we will lead, sometimes we will follow, but always we will contribute constructively. Above all, we will stay true to our commitment to work openly and collaboratively with residents, with each other, with both local and with national government. By doing this, I am confident that we will deliver the best outcomes for our city and do as much as we can to put that trust back into politics. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Dyer. We'll now hear responses from party group leaders, starting with Councillor M. Edwards on behalf of...
Thank you, Lord Mayor. As Tony said, we've seen many changes over the last 6 months, not only here in City Hall, but at national government too. And it's hard not to see parallels between this new administration here, getting to grips with the difficulties that we've inherited, that Tony mentioned, and those facing the new Labour government in Westminster. We both also have a remit to the people who elected us to do the best with what we have and to put those who have been most impacted by years of austerity first. However, there are differences. Unlike Westminster, where one party has all the power and responsibility, we have a committee system, where there is a chance for all parties to contribute if they take a seat at the table. Also, unlike our city budget, the government has far more greater taxation powers, and it is a political decision to what extent they do that to increase funding for essential services. So we all watched the first Labour budget in 14 years by the first female Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, with hope. And we welcome the rise in capital gains tax and inheritance tax, as well as more public spending on the NHS and a rise to the minimum wage. While devolving powers to combined authorities will hopefully mean more financial support, we do so far worry that this isn't going far enough. And yet we don't yet have a seat at the Westminster table, but the Green Party would have been bolder than that, taxing the super wealthy, raising the funds which would allow the scrapping of the unfair two-child benefit cap, keeping the winter fuel allowance and putting more money into local authorities who are at the front line of delivering many services. Labour raising the cap on the bus fares while not increasing fuel duty is a concerning sign that they aren't as committed to the environment as we need them to be. To quote our new Green MP, Carla Denyer, this budget was a missed opportunity. So as we go into our own budget setting process, I want us to reflect on our own opportunities. Every elected councillor here has an opportunity. We are in a privileged position to be here, and the committee system is an opportunity to work together. I'm really proud of the work the committees, and especially the committee chairs, have done in these first few months. Those who have taken their place, shown up and put the work in. And there is still work to be done. I look forward to the committee review working group evaluating how we can improve and build trust inside and outside City Hall. No previous administration has had such a process for review and improvement, and this shows our ambition to get our governance right. We also have a responsibility to everyone who works for the council, not only to support them setting a balanced budget, but to set the political agenda so that they can work effectively to serve the public. And we have a duty to make sure that we are giving them the best political direction that we can. And finally, we have a responsibility to each other. The Green Group has always been clear that we believe that no one party has a monopoly on good ideas, and I think the public believe that too, because first and foremost, we are working for them and for Bristol. Thank you.
And now Councillor Renard to speak on behalf of the Labour Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Dyer, for advance sight of your speech. I too would like to pay credit to all councillors from all parties for their work on the policy committees this year. There's clearly been some teething pains, but governance mechanisms aside, I don't doubt that councillors are giving their all to this new process. We've always said we would work together on common interests that put the city first, including the council's finances. And it's worth remembering, though, that all functioning democracies have an opposition. Scrutiny from those outside the administration is crucial. We will, however, always be constructive in our approach. When it became apparent that the hike in allotment fees didn't have the votes to pass the committee, we put forward an alternative, a smaller increase that would still see the saving target met, and ironically very similar to what was opposed by the Greens earlier in the year. When faced with cuts to help when you need it budget that provides warned would have unintended consequences, we sought to find a way forward by having the council co-design a new service that would meet savings targets whilst ensuring their concerns didn't come to pass. I mention this because whilst we are in opposition, we are still shaping policies for the benefit of our city. And might I add, this approach to opposition is much more generous than in the approach the Green Party ever took with us. It's only about 8 months ago that the Greens justified voting down cuts budgets solely because of stubborn ethics. I wonder if they'll stick to that line this year. We will play our part to get the council on a stable financial footing, and it's worth remembering the Labour administration's 8 balanced budgets protected frontline services in the faces of real terms funding cuts. It wasn't without its challenges, but we managed to do it year after year. We will, of course, continue to lobby the government for more funding for local government, but local government is just one of the areas that Tories left broke and broken. NHS waiting times at historical highs. Young people with no chance of getting on the housing ladder. Incomes stagnated. Fixing this mess will take time, but at long last we have a government that understands and will address the situation that councils are in. Already we've seen increased funding for adult social care, SEND, social housing and the 217,000 to tackle homelessness this winter. It will take a while to turn the country around, but I firmly believe that we are on the right track. Now, Tony talked of public trust in politics. Restoring faith in politics means being honest with the public, not pretending there are magical fiscal wands we can wave to conjure up more cash given the 22 billion hole left in the national finances by the previous Tory government. And at some point, the Greens are going to need to start taking responsibility rather than looking to blame everyone else. I look forward to working with everyone to find solutions to Bristol's budget challenges, particularly on matters like Invest to Save and revenue-raising proposals. We're all here today because our residents trusted us to stand up for their and the city's interests, and that is what we will continue to do. Thank you.
And now Councillor Joss Clark to speak on behalf of the group.
In this instance, thank you, Leader. I really welcome the fact that you felt willing and able to share your speech in advance. Thank you very much for that. I mean this quite sincerely, because this willingness to be open with other groups is new and a refreshing way of working. I hope that this council will continue to work in this spirit for many years to come, as it is Bristol's residents who benefit when we work together constructively. I do tend to agree with you, Leader, when you say that public trust is not in good shape. This has to change, as it looks like things are going to not get any easier for any of us in the near future, with the council facing massive budgetary challenges. So even if it is difficult to hear, the council has to keep our residents informed about how tricky the situation really is, and to continue to listen to the views of our residents. The committee system has given all parties who make up the council a unique opportunity to be part of the decision-making process at every level. It is a shame that not every party felt that they could step up and take a policy chair. But at least every group is part of the council's leadership team, as every group has taken on vice chair roles. This has given us a truly cross-party approach to leadership in the city. It has become clear that the government settlement is going to leave us with some really tough decisions, and this has not been helped by the state of the council's current finances. Speaking for myself, as someone on both housing and adult social care policy committees this year, I have been quite frankly stunned by the state that we have found these departments to be in. The service delivery and financial mess extends to other areas of the council already identified by the Leader. This council finds itself in a position of not only having a tough settlement, but also being on the back foot when it comes to picking up the mess of the previous administration. Of course, we were told that they were delivering on so many promises, but no, this was not the case. They were good at delivering new houses, for example, but when it came to the basic maintenance of our existing stock, the previous administration did not deliver. All this leaves the current committees in a position where they are having to work hard to get an acceptable baseline of service delivery, let alone start to deliver on a new agenda and new priorities. And all this comes before having to make monetary savings.
Councillor Clark, can you wrap it up now, please? Thank you.
I've just got two more paragraphs.
Paragraphs? I don't think so. Maybe one or two sentences. But...
Two more sentences. Leader, after years of political turmoil, both nationally and locally, there is so much more that could be said about the mistakes of the past. But from residents struggling with the cost of living crisis and our collective task to improve the council services in the face of massive financial difficulties, it is time to look forward to the future and move forward as one city. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Councillor Mark Weston, on behalf of the Conservative Group, please.
Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor. I'm not sure what your title is today. Thank you very much. It's an interesting opportunity to respond to the budget. I think despite Councillor Renard's words and attempts to put lipstick on a pig, the reality of this is that the budget remains one ugly swine. If you try, I'm finding it very hard to reconcile the rhetoric of the Labour Party pre-general election to the reality of what they're doing with their last budget. Because this budget is going to be bad for the country and bad for our city. It hammers our pensioners, it wounds our charities, it cripples businesses, and on a national level, it's going to destroy our farmers. Thank God food security isn't important to everybody. But we're here today to talk about how it's going to impact the council. It is going to be bad. There is no other word for it. You can't hide that. Now, at the moment, we don't know some of the detail. As is tradition, when it comes to government settlements, we're not going to find out some of that detail till December. But we know, so we don't know the share, the adult social care money, or the special educational needs money. That isn't there yet. We don't know quite what the rules are going to be when it comes to council tax rises. It won't be the 15% that Councillor Dyer has gone out to consultation on. We know it won't be there. There's still the referendum block. But we are going to face some very tough choices about how this budget is going to impact our key partners when we work across this city. It's predicted that nationally the charity sector is going to have to find £800 million to deal with the changes to the NICs. Now that will trickle down to our partners that work with us in the city, tackling things like homelessness. They are going to have to cut services to meet that. That is going to hurt us. Our One City partners, when we work with the universities, the chancellors of all the universities said that they're going to take a very thin gruel, I think they called it. That's going to hurt our ability to work with our partners. The companies that do our work, ETM that do the road maintenance, that do the installation, this will hit them as well. They actually might either increase their prices or reduce their willingness to do work. The waste company, ladies and gentlemen, the impact on the waste company for what's coming now is £800,000. It's not exempt. Even if there's an exemption granted to local government, and that's a big if, arm's length companies are almost certainly not going to be covered by that. That's £800,000. Are we going to reduce collection rates? How's that going to impact our residents? This is not a good budget for us at all, despite the rhetoric, despite the attempts. We're going to make some very tough choices in this city. We're going to have to face some very stark realities. I only wish the Labour government would live up to its. Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you, and that's the end of Lord Mayor's business. That is the longest one ever, I think. So now we move on to agenda item 6, which is public forum. So 30 minutes will be allowed for this item, which is split into 15 minutes for petitions and statements and 15 minutes for questions. Details of the petitions, statements and questions received have been published on the website. I'll go through the list, calling on those that have indicated they plan to attend the meeting. Speakers are asked to pay attention to the traffic lights on the dais and to start to wrap up when the lights turn to amber. There was one public forum petition received for this meeting, and there were a total of 72 public statements received, and a list will be displayed on the screen. 7 members of the public indicated that they plan to attend and speak to their statements, and they are displayed on the screen, and we'll run through those statements in order. I'll invite each person to speak for a minute. Please summarise your statement and bear in mind they were published for councillors and the public to read in advance of the meeting. First, do we have Michaela Andrews? Thank you. You've got 1 minute, Michaela. Thank you.
Thank you. I've submitted a petition calling on the council to transition 100% plant for internal meetings and events as part of its actions to address the climate crisis. This is a change that we've been asking the council to make for 3 years now, and in that time we've seen 10 other councils across the UK make this transition. We've repeatedly heard that there is little catering within Bristol City Council, but that simply means that this is an easy but nonetheless impactful change for you to make that would still send out a very powerful symbolic message. We've also received support from several committee meetings, and we've collected close to 500 public signatures from other residents who want this change to happen. So please treat this matter with the urgency it requires. Bristol was the first council to declare a climate emergency, and the science is crystal clear that a plant-based food system is an absolutely essential part of the solution to climate change. So why are we still behind 10 other progressive councils who have already made the switch to plant-based catering? Thank you.
Thank you, Michaela. I think we've got an issue with our traffic light system at the moment, but yeah, I've got a stopwatch anyway, so don't worry. So next is public statement number 14 from Jen Smith. Is Jen here? No. Okay, thank you. So we'll move on to public statement 56 from Dan Aykroyd. I think Dan's here. Thank you.
Boys, my Lord Mayor. At the escalation panel recently, I was shocked that Labour councillors were not aware of how serious the problems are in the housing department. The mould, lack of safety checks and lack of required fire alarms is a terrible situation, both for tenants but also for taxpayers, as we're losing huge sums of money on void properties and paying for waking watches. During the escalation panel, multiple councillors said that the cancelling of the planned Gorham Homes projects showed the need for scrutiny. But we had scrutiny last year where multiple councillors, including yourself, my Lord Mayor, tried to dig into why the number of void properties was so high. It's not enough to bring the scrutiny committees back. We need to understand how the council housing was allowed to get so bad, despite having a scrutiny committee try to get to the facts. And we need to investigate and publish details of exactly how bad the housing stock is and why these problems were kept from both councillors and members of the public.
Thank you, Dan. We now have public statement 63 from the Eagle House Young Mums Group. Is there a representative here? No. Okay, thank you. So we'll move on to public statement 68, Julian Okoye. Is Julian here? Yep. And Julian, this is on the public petition statement, Save Our Rivers, Stopping the Sewage Scandal. Thank you.
Lord Mayor, thank you. And public statement by Wessex Water. Good evening, Council. We agree with you that more needs to be done to protect and improve our rivers and that storm overflows are unacceptable. On our part, we have put forward plans to our regulator seeking their approval for a £1.6 billion programme of improvements over the next 5 years. However, framing the work we do as dumping raw sewage is unhelpful. We can't do this. We are here because storm overflows were built to stop homes and properties from flooding when sewers are overwhelmed by rain. Nearly half the people in the city live or work in properties where the rain falling on their property mixes with their sewage before it leaves their site. In some places, up to 50% of the volume of water in a sewer can be runoff from council-owned highways. What is framed as a sewage scandal is in fact a poor rainwater management scandal. It is a scandal that we're all allowing rain, a precious natural resource, to mix with sewage and overwhelm the sewage system. We are building very large concrete storage tanks to hold back rain mixed with sewage, rather than working together to stop rain mixing with sewage in the first place. And new development is continuously exacerbating the situation due to a lack of planning control and unsupported legislation.
Julian, can you wrap it up, please?
We offer our support for the motion's recommendations and look forward to working with the city for a greener and healthier future.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, we've got public from David Redgewell on funding for city regions. David, please.
Thank you. So I think Councillor Dyer has made it absolutely clear. The Labour government believes in city regions or cities moving fastly in that direction. And the first thing I'd say is we need to move forward with North Somerset Council's membership of the combined authority and push the MPs to make sure that they are a member for the May election in 2025. We don't want to miss that opportunity, and that will need working with the city's MPs and the city regions MPs, that's Bain, South Gloucestershire and North Somerset, to make sure that happens. A strong city region is what we require, and we must make sure. On decision-making process, at the moment, WECA's still in special measures. I am concerned on Friday, the bus improvement board meets, advisory board meets. It will consider putting up bus fares in this city, which are controlled by WECA, not by central government. from £4 to £6 to actually come in line with central government in December. I would urge the 4 councils involved to look at that situation very seriously and consider whether we should continue to keep those bus fares until April and negotiate with the Department for Transport. That's not an open meeting, and I'm very concerned about democracy.
Thank you, David. Finally, Public Safety 1, Gary Hopkins on Newquay Road Youth Club.
Thank you. Pity the young mums weren't here because they had a lot of good things to say and important things. We were very frustrated when the ex-youth club was handed across some years ago to a church that had no basis in the area at all, and actually in other parts of the country practices some very unpleasant practices in terms of gay conversion therapy. We actually, the community, rejected this church, and we've been fighting for some while now to get the lease terminated. We provided huge numbers of instances of fundamental breaches of their lease, and the community asset transfer should be terminated. We know basically that legal officers are reluctant to take action. We experienced that previously, and I'd have to remind members of that's exactly what we were told. It was impossible when it came to the phone mast company putting up its phone mast in the middle of Redcatch Park, and the mayor actually believed the officers that it was impossible. When it came down to it, when clear instructions were given, not only did we win that battle, but the company actually didn't even turn up for the land tribunal. So now we want to see the legal officers and speak to them and to make clear to them.
If you could wrap it up, please. Thank you.
Yes, that action is absolutely needed, and no excuses will be made, especially as promises were made just before the election.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. We will now do the public questions received. The questions received have been published on the website and are shared on the screen. 46 questions were received from members of the public. 18 of those have indicated that they wish to attend. We will try to cover as many questions as possible in the time available. It may not be possible for everyone to speak, so we ask for your patience as we run through the questions in order. When I call on you, your question will be displayed on the screen. The leader or relevant chair will reply verbally to your question. Following the reply, you will be invited to ask supplementary questions. Please remember you have a maximum of 2. First, do we have Hayley Hemming here? No. Okay, thank you. So we'll go to public question number 3 from Melissa Topping. Is Melissa here? No. Okay, so let's move on to public question 10 from Peter Hatton. Is Peter here? We're not doing very well today, are we? Okay. We'll move on to public question 11. Lisa Dicker. Is Lisa here? Nope. Okay. Public question 13, Roger Livingston. Yay. Okay. Roger, you had 3 questions for Councillor Plowden on road safety. Councillor Plowden, did you want to answer those questions together or separately?
What would you prefer? I can answer all your questions at once, or I can answer them one by one. What would you prefer, Mr. Livingston? Carry on. Okay. So thank you very much for coming in today. In fact, you've done well to get so far up the pecking order, because and it's always good to have questions from. So I really welcome that public scrutiny. We surface. One of the things we're doing is resurfacing 200 roads every year, and that's a real effort that we make to try and make sure that we're making sure that the roads are in really good condition. And the road markings are meant to be completed on completion, and in some cases that's done quite promptly. This year, it's not going very well, and I'm happy to say that because of that, we are actually bringing in a second contractor because we've got concerns about the performance of the first contractor on linings. We're doing a number of other things to improve the situation, which includes as part of our re-procurement of our contracts, we're putting much more emphasis on the actual people who do the resurfacing to reinstate the lines. We are making sure that the contractor rearranges their own traffic management, whether that's for reinstating the lines when we've resurfaced it, or in terms of when they're doing the white lining, just replacing white lining, because it's much more simple for them to do that. And we are also commissioning a survey to capture what road markings exist on our network and plan to be able to prioritise better to replace the fading paintwork. But I do agree with you that I personally am disappointed. There's a number of cycle lanes across the city which I rely on the white line to keep me safe, and those are fading away to nothing. So I think there's a real problem there. And we only have a budget. I've inherited a budget of just £33,000 per annum to replace all the white lines and all the lines across the entire city, and that includes things that are there specifically to keep things legal, like yellow lines and residence parking. That's not enough, so we're using some of the road resurfacing budget to fill in the gaps. But overall, I share your frustration. So that's the money. One of your questions was what was spent on renewing white lines. It's £33,000 plus the money embedded in the resurfacing programme. And no, we haven't given up on health and safety at all. We are absolutely complying as best we can within the budget we have on the guidance well-managed highways from the Department of Transport, which sets out the requirements for what the authority needs to do to comply with our statutory duty. And we've got a strategy which has been approved by the DFT and actually there's a little bit of counterintuitively here. So one of the things I've asked also to happen is not always to replace the centre lines, because there's a lot of evidence that without centre lines on the roads, it actually reduces speed and gives people like cyclists and scooters more room.
Roger, you've got two...
There's an answer to your questions. You're,
oh, sorry.
I think you may well have some...
Yes, you might have two supplementary questions if you would.
I mean, are you aware that there's a three-way junction at Blaze that's got no give-way lines on it at all? So I don't know what people do there. I'm pleased that you replace all the traffic lights, because you could save money by not having any traffic lights replacements. You seem to think that if the white lines aren't important, or you think you can get away with it. Sorry, yeah, I know you're quite genuine about this, but it is very distressing that these white lines, either they're important or they're not. The Road Traffic Act of 1980...
Roger, sorry to interrupt, but we just want a supplementary question, please. We don't want a statement.
Are you aware that it's a statutory responsibility under the Road Traffic Act of 1988, Section 29, for you to be responsible for road safety? And that includes the Highway Code, which thinks the white lines are quite important.
Absolutely aware of that. I put the One City Partnership just last week, road safety and our aspirations to Vision Zero, which is 0 people killed or seriously injured, one of our top priorities. It's something we put in our Green Party manifesto, and I think it's particularly well suited. It's also One City Partnership target to have 0 killed and seriously injured by 2040, and I think it's something particularly well suited to collaboration across agencies. We are having to prioritise. We're having to prioritise across everything we do with the budgets that we've got. It's more important to us that we keep this council functioning, and so we will absolutely replace things, but we're having to do that on evidence and on priorities. So that's one of the reasons why I've made sure that we've got a good condition survey of all the lines across the city, so we can prioritise our investment where it's going to make the most difference.
And Roger, if you've got a second supplementary.
Well, it doesn't look possible for you to renew all the white lines. Like a hopeless task, because it's got so far behind with it. What about the zebra crossings? There's not a zebra crossing here in the city that's got all its white stripes. Don't you think you could prioritise those?
I think that's something I'll take back into the team. Suggestion, I think, on actions like the one you mentioned, and on zebra crossings, we really got to make sure that we got our road safety correct and that we're protecting. I don't like to call them vulnerable people. I like to call them people on foot and on bicycle, because vulnerable people, almost assumes that they're likely to be hurt, whereas I'd rather say that we're aiming for Vision Zero and a full systems approach to road safety. That includes safer vehicles, safer driving, safer road users, and of course good, well-maintained roads. So that's what we're doing, and I'm sorry that we have to prioritise limited resources.
Thank you very much. So public question 16, is Alderman Colin Smith here today? No. Okay, let's move on to public question 8. Is from Richard Norwood here today? Nope. And I don't think Jen Smith is here either, is she, for public question 22? No. Okay. Public question 24, no, not here. Public question 26 is from James P. and Ben Reddick. Are they here? No. I understand Eileen Kay is here. Is that right? So Eileen, this is public question 27. It's on the Avon Pension Fund. It's for Councillor Dyer, please.
In the past year,
we've just got your question. We're just going to get a response now from Councillor Dyer first, please, and then you can ask your supplementary.
Thank you, Eileen, and sorry you were cut short. The Councillors' Pension Fund is held with the Avon Pension Fund, and that's actually administered by Bath and North East Council for complicated reasons going back to when we were the County of Avon. So the scheme's funds are invested entirely separately from those of the council. It has its own policy for responsible investment and are subject to separate regulatory regimes to local authority investments. They are therefore not directly governed by this council's ethical and equitable investment policy. However, the council's policy can be used to inform the views of the council's pension representative, which is Councillor Fiance, and they can then feed into matters such as the pension fund's responsible investment policy.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Eileen, you've now got you can ask one supplementary if you wish.
Considering to Israel and it has funds in the arming industry, can you guarantee, considering that Israel is under investigation for war crimes and for genocide, that the council doesn't have blood on its hands?
My understanding is of the own investments. I have any investments in companies that are dealing with Israel. We have a limited number of investments, mainly with our arm's length companies, with Bristol Port and a couple of other companies.
Thank you very much. So public question 28 is from Jack Slater. Is Jack here? Yes, he is. Thank you. And Jack, you have a question on plant-based catering for Councillor Dyer. Councillor Dyer, if you'd like to go to your response, please.
Thank you, Jack. At the moment, there is no policy, but the council is currently out to tender for its events and catering contract, and plant-based catering is a key consideration for a future award. Policy decisions are now taken by the respective committee. In this case, there are committees which could make decisions linked to plant-based catering. These are the Strategy and Resources Committee, which is responsible for budgeting and is chaired by myself, and the Environment and Sustainability Committee, which is chaired by Councillor Martin Fodor, who's on the corner just now. Just stick your hand up, Martin.
Thank you. You've got one supplementary, Jack, if you wish.
Okay, that's okay, thank you. That answers my question.
Thank you very much. So, public question 29 is from Matt Saunders. Is Matt Sanders here today? Yep, thank you. And Matt, your question is on parking services and bus gates. You've got 3 questions actually for Councillor Plowden. Again, Councillor Plowden, it might be good to take all those questions at once, if that's better.
Hello again, Matt. I think you deserve some sort of season ticket or something, because you've been to every committee and every full council, and I commend you for your persistence and your tenacity. So thank you for coming again, and thank you for keeping me and the officers on our toes. And your research is impeccable. In terms of the statutory parking services annual report, I've been asking for this ever since I came in, and I read on taking up this role, I read your very long document and realised that we weren't compliant and that we were already a year behind. And I've been asking and hoping that at every committee meeting we'd be able to actually release that. It's complicated because this is the first time that CAS, Clean Air Zone data, is part of the mix. And we are wanting to make sure that what we do is being passed by the accountants, but now the lawyers are looking at it. And so that's taking a lot longer than I would have liked, but it's important that it's both financially accurate and legally correct. So thank you for your patience, and I'm hoping that the next one might follow quite quickly onwards. So that's the answer to your first question. Your second question is, list in descending order from lowest to highest, how many penalty charge notices have been issued so far in 2024? I've got a list of 16 bus gates and the number of PCNs issued. I could read them all out, but I'm not sure that's the best use of everyone's time here today, so I'm more than happy to publish them on the website and to send them to you direct. But if you'd like me to read them out, Lord Mayor, it'll take me a few minutes because there's 16 of them and increasing numbers.
Well, I think if you can contact Matt directly, that would be better. We would like to hear from some other people if possible.
And
what if you just do the first three and the last three?
Okay, Colston Avenue, 1013, Broad Quay, 1088, Union Street, Bus Lane, brackets, Broadmead, brackets, 1157. Baldwin Street junction with High Street, 8,337. High Street junction with Baldwin Street, 9,067. And Cumberland Road, 58,732. It's a bit like football scores, isn't it? 58,732 since joined the financial year of 2020, the calendar year of 2024. The next question was about Cumberland Road Busgate and it being the highest grossing and apparently least effective busgate in the entire country. I don't think that a high level of PCNs necessarily shows that it's not effective. In fact, the reason we put that in was because we wanted to improve air quality, and air quality has significantly improved following the introduction of bus gates. And there was a report in the Clean Air Zone, I think it was January or December this year, just gone, from the previous mayor, which showed that we've made improvements to clean air across the piece. And we've seen a significant drop-off. So the latest figures we're looking about 3.5, I think 3,800 in the last month, compared with a much higher number earlier this year. So things are getting better.
Matt, you've got 2 supplementaries if you wish.
The last question was...
Have you done questions, Councillor Plowden? Yes, you have. So you've got 2 supplementaries now. You have a maximum of 3 questions. You can ask 2 supplementaries.
Okay. The third question was, having had nearly a year to study the data, can the Council's transport and highways experts please explain why so many motorists have driven through this restriction? So that obviously wasn't answered. So I'll do a supplementary question then. The parking services annual report, by the way, is only 11 pages long, so I don't know why it takes 19 months to write that.
Can I say I'm as disappointed as you are, and I'm really shocked that it wasn't actually published.
Councillor Plowden, we need to get on with the supplementaries, please. So Matt, please, your first supplementary.
Okay. In recent one of the reasons that wasn't stated for excessive contraventions is in recent months the council has lost several cases to the Traffic Penalty Tribunal due to inadequate signage. At the 12th of September Transport Committee meeting, an officer's response included, out of respect for the tribunal's decisions, officers are reviewing the driver's eye view of all existing signage and, if appropriate, will consider installing additional signage. So have the officers done that review of all the existing signage and shown you their conclusions?
So we have put a number of additional signs in, particularly there was one judgment that suggested that another one needed to be done on Gasferry Road, and it was supplemented with an additional yellow sign. An advance warning sign was then added on the near side, and we've subsequently added the additional sign on the opposite side of the road. The original signage was compliant with the TSRGD, which is guidelines only, but I know that you've looked at the traffic signs manual and dispute that. But we've supplemented this over time to help increase the public messaging. I think it's also worth saying, Matt, that out of 118 cases that's gone to TPT on this particular bus gate, we've lost 14. I think all of those have been said that this is not a general finding, but it's a specific finding to the specific case.
Matt, you've got one final supplementary, please.
Okay. Yes, they have had new signs in gas, and a recent adjudication is that even those are too small. So they've got that wrong as well. Oh, yes, right. So the other question was, on Friday, 28th of October, the warning sign at the end of Gasferry Road, which is been key to a lot of the cases that the council lost, the adjudicators says is vital to the enforcement of the bus gate. On Friday, 28th of October, it was knocked down under mysterious circumstances, and the council failed to repair it for 2 weeks and has now removed it altogether, so there's currently no sign at the junction, and the local authorities traffic orders regulations 1996 requires that if you're enforcing a restriction, there has to be adequate information made available to persons using the road by the traffic signs, and there's currently no traffic sign there at that junction. So can you reassure us that the council is not enforcing penalty charge notices relating to this period of at least 2.5 weeks so far, where the sign has been compromised and is now missing, as that would obviously be an illegal breach of the local authorities traffic orders regulations 1996?
It's been made safe. The previous questioner duty to make sure that nobody gets hurt as far as reasonable possible on the highway. So it's been made safe. The new post is going in tomorrow, and a sign will be put on it and very quickly after that.
Thank you. So we now move on to public question from Susan Newman, M. Bristol's complicity in genocide, and that's for Councillor Dyer, please. Is Susan Newman here, by the way? Oh, she's not here. Okay. In that case, we'll move on to public question 32. Alexander Eldon. Is Alexander here? Yeah. And this is a question for Councillor Williams, please. So Councillor Williams, on to the question on van dwellers.
Are they going to be removed from the dams?
Just a moment, please. Question, so we'll get the answer from Councillor Williams.
Okay.
So take a seat, and then if you wish, you can ask a supplementary. So Councillor Williams, please.
Lord Mayor, this is a shared responsibility between myself and Councillor Parsons. I think Councillor Parsons is prepared to answer.
Okay, although your name is on the list, but okay, if Councillor Parsons would like to answer it, that'd be great.
Okay. Thank you very much for your question. I think one of the things that we really need to do when we're discussing vehicle dwellers is we need to change the kinds of conversations that we're having. Vehicle dwellers are our fellow citizens, and the council has a duty to work with them in the same way as we do with everybody else. And we have to do that in a way that's fair, that's equitable, and that takes account of the welfare and the rights and the interests of people who live in vehicles. The increase that we've seen, the very large increase in people living in vehicles in our city over the last few years, is a direct consequence of the housing crisis. People who live in vehicles, by and large, tell us that the main reason why they're living in a vehicle is because they can't get access to settled housing. And this is a huge challenge for us as a council and as a city. We're not providing for the basic housing needs of our citizens, and so I think it's really important that we frame this question in that context. So while it's very important that we consider the impacts of vehicle dwellers on housed neighbours, housed residents, we also mustn't lose sight of their rights and their welfare. So in that context, we're proactively addressing issues around vehicle dwelling, both through our neighbourhood enforcement team, so kind of working on those impacts on settled residents, and through the Gypsy, Roma and Traveller team. So there's a paper that's coming to the Homes and Housing Delivery Committee, which I chair, early next year, and that's going to examine the work that we're currently undertaking with vehicle dwellers in the city, and making recommendations on moving forwards. People living in vehicles are present in many cities and towns across the country, and in rural areas, and actually Bristol is seen nationally as a model of good practice. We don't necessarily have more vehicle dwellers here, but we've done much more here than in most places to understand and to work with them. And so over the last few years, we've opened and run 9 meanwhile sites, so places that people can move to off the streets, because we know that people are vulnerable on the streets, and into places where they can access services. And we've got an ongoing commitment to identify and open new sites like this. So this is a big part of our response to the issue. Vehicle dwellers around the Downs, they're not a cohesive unit, and we can't treat people as as a kind of undifferentiated group. People are individuals with their own needs and their own problems. And so we take targeted action, just in the same way as a whole street wouldn't be penalised for the conduct of an individual household. So parking services do enforce the restrictions around the Downs regularly, but there are limitations on what they can do, because they can only issue penalty charge notices in certain circumstances to motor vehicles that are registered with the DVLA. So we can't actually take action through parking services against the caravan, although we do against cars, vans and camper vans. And also, while parking services have the power to remove illegally parked vehicles, we do have a policy not to remove vehicles that may be occupied because of the health and safety risks for the occupants. We think it would be unethical for a parking services officer to remove what is, after all, somebody's home. Councillor Williams and I are leading on some work that is going ahead next month. We're bringing together a round table of officers and relevant agencies to work on solutions. And as I said, there'll be a paper coming to my committee next year. But really, we're doing as much as we can under the circumstances of a grave housing crisis, and I think we should be proud of the work that we're doing actually with this community.
Thank you. Have you got a supplementary question you'd like to ask?
Savile Road, and I'm speaking on behalf of the residents of Sewage. We are tired and weary of finding carrier bags full of human excrement. They are nipping over the walls of the university and using it as a toilet. The bushes outside of our place are littered with used toilet tissue, and that is a fact which was recorded by BBC Points West. It's disgraceful, and we've got rights as well.
We can't have a statement. We can have a supplementary question, please.
So why aren't our rights looked at as council taxpayers and one of the highest paid council taxpayers in the whole of Bristol? Why aren't our rights being looked at?
Thank you, Councillor Parsons.
Thanks very much. I think, as I said, there's always a balance to be struck, I think, between the needs of housed residents and those residents of our city who are who live in vehicles, and who aren't able, in many cases, to access settled housing and aren't able to access the kinds of services that those of us who are housed take for granted. So I think it's always a fine balance to make, but we are absolutely committed to making sure that we enforce certainly anything that has to do with the health and safety of our residents, and we'll continue to do that. You know, I think it's something that we are we're very careful to make sure that we always start with the rights and the welfare of all of our residents, and that's our primary concern. So we really do everything that we can to make sure that that antisocial behaviour is dealt with when it needs to be, but also that people are able to go about their lives you know, free from harassment and free from stigma as well. I would say that's a big feature of the current discourse that we have around people who live in vehicles. There's an awful lot of stigma, and we need to combat that.
Thank you very much.
May I ask why the question?
Thank you. That's the end of from the members of the public. I would like to inform members of the public. No, time parade now. Oh, here we go. Please, can I have order in the public gallery? If the disruption to the meeting continues, I will have no choice but to adjourn the meeting. Please, can I have order in the public gallery? This is my final warning. If the disruption continues, I will adjourn the meeting. You've made your point. Please leave.
I'm going to go outside.
I'd like to inform the public that the meeting is expected at around 8 o'clock. I invite you to remain, hear the other agenda items. If not, please leave as quietly as possible. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to agenda item 7, which is petitions notified by councillors. There's been one councillor petition received for this meeting, which was published yesterday. However, Councillor Bartle has given her apologies for today, so this will be considered at the next meeting. Sorry, given their apologies, I do apologise. Agenda item 8 is annual report of the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman decision. This report is for noting. I'd like to move the report. I'd now like to call upon Councillor Shona Gemfrey to speak on behalf of the Green Group. Councillor Gemfrey, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, so thank you to the author of this report on the Ombudsman, complaint handlers within the Council who have worked so hard to investigate and remedy these issues. I think what has struck me most were the number of complaints about adult social care and about educational provision for children with special educational needs. These were the areas most likely to face delay in implementing the Ombudsman's recommendations, and the reasons for these delays were stated to be operational/capacity. We all know that social care and provision for SEND education is still woefully underfunded in this country. While the autumn budget promised much needed investment in the NHS, the social care sector has been left feeling like the forgotten poorer cousin. The Labour Party did initially plan £1.1 billion for social care reform, but disappointingly scrapped this shortly after coming to power in July. They say there is no money for these things and no solution to the hole in the national finances. We say implement a wealth tax and make the super wealthy pay their dues. This is also a gender equality issue. This country runs on unpaid labour and unpaid care work, and the vast majority of that is done by women. In terms of educational support for children with special educational needs, we know that this has been poor in Bristol and nationwide. We know that employees in the sector are often overworked and underpaid. We need Westminster to invest in this too, or we are being unfair to the next generation as well as the current one. The Disability Policy Centre said that the increase of £1 billion for SEND in this budget is, I quote, a drop in the ocean, which will quickly disappear in the current fractured system. On a local level, the SEND strategy for Bristol ran out in 2022. The previous administration did not renew it, so it has only just been replaced, and this may also have contributed to the failings in the system. It is very easy for these areas to be overlooked and given only crumbs to get by, because the recipients of this care are often vulnerable and less able to speak out. Because under capitalism, they are seen as less productive because they can't contribute to some bottom line. But all humans deserve a good education and quality of life, whether they can line some billionaire's pocket or not. So I want to thank all our council employees who are doing their best for our residents, while never having enough time or resources to give this city what it needs. I want to thank everyone who is trying to learn from our mistakes. We are all only human, and sometimes we all need to eat humble pie. But we must learn from our own mistakes and change what we can, but also we need to never lose sight of the core causes of this inequality. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Gentry. And now Councillor Rippington to speak on the group.
Thank you, Lord. The Ombudsman's report is an essential tool in helping us to recognise where we are as an authority in terms of the complaints we receive and how we deal with them. I think it's important to note in this report that although only 17% of cases were upheld this year, compared to 25% last year, the number of complaints has risen significantly, up by 33%. It's also important to note that the Ombudsman made no public interest reports. It is true that we are at least average, if not a bit above, in terms of our complaint handling. This year, the complaints team have also retained their ISO complaints handling in organisation certificate for the 9th year running, which is a commendable achievement. So why are we receiving so many more complaints? I think it's fair to say that in every year since I've been a councillor, finances have been squeezed to such an extent that people are paying more council tax and getting less in return. There is no team in the council which has not been squeezed, no team which has not lost experienced staff and been asked to do more with less. The inevitable consequence of such a squeeze is that people make more mistakes or simply do not have the resources to carry out the job as effectively as they would like. Many of the complaints in this report, but not all, reflect this. Indeed, last year the Ombudsman was critical of our complaint handling process in general, and I note that this has been improved with more resources placed centrally as well as more dedicated complaint handlers within the services. This makes the point well. One particular issue stands out, which is the Council's failure to provide adequate training to staff who allocate home-to-school transport. While this is an area which causes us severe budget pressure, it's still important that we act fairly and in accordance with our own rules. And I note that the Council is conducting a review which may reveal other cases. It's also made clear in the report that the Council is responsible for making sure that arrangements specified in education and healthcare plans for children are put in place. The report recognises the difficulty in sourcing therapists, for example, but does not consider providing financial resources to allow parents to source their own provision as an adequate response. The complaint about failing to consider vulnerabilities and learning disability, of which the Council was aware when issuing letters and advising about benefits, is also of concern. I've read the officer's response and hope that the standard letters have indeed been improved. It's important that we don't see more complaints of this nature in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, Councillor Classic to talk on behalf of the Liberal Democrat Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Speaking to the Ombudsman's annual report, focusing on the steps that Bristol City Council is taking to build trust, improve transparency and demonstrate accountability to our residents. It is disappointing to see that overall the number of complaints received by the Council has increased, and that is clearly an area of concern for the Council, that they have risen quite dramatically since the last report. However, it is positive to see that the number of complaints that were upheld is just a fraction of the overall complaints we as an organisation received in 2023-24. And this reflects the scale and complexity of our services, as well as the Council's commitment to addressing issues at the local level before they escalate. Transparency is fundamental in building trust within our community, and we should be committed to openly acknowledging both our successes and areas for improvement. I'm glad to see that we are exceeded the national average in providing satisfactory remedies before cases even reach the Ombudsman. And it shows our staff and systems as trying to proactively resolve issues, an important positive that reflects the dedication of our council to serving the public responsibly. That said, the report does highlight areas where we experience escalations, particularly in education and adult social care. And while I'm pleased to see that the Council is implementing more streamlined processes and additional resources to support resolution, we need to work within these areas to stop them becoming overburdened with complaints in the first place and ensure our residents, many of whom are some of the most vulnerable in the city, are receiving adequate care from these services to not need a complaint to be made in the first place. In children's services, for example, we as the Policy Committee need to urgently look at delays around SEND to reduce the number of parents forced into the complaint system in order to receive adequate care for their children. While challenges remain, I hope we continue to implement recommendations given to us. I'm glad to see that the Council is committed to a culture of openness, responsibility and service improvement, and our focus should not only be on fixing issues but on learning from them and ensuring that our services are as fair, accessible and effective as possible for everyone in Bristol.
Thank you very much. And now Councillor Weston to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group.
Thank you very much. Colleagues will be delighted to know that this is the last time I'm standing up today. Well, of course, other than to go get my adjournment break. The report today is actually a bit of a mixed bag. There are some really good points in it. I apparently am. Yeah, okay. All right, there are some very good points in it. I think we probably can be proud at the way that so few of the complaints as a percentage of the total number are being upheld. That is good. I think the team are obviously working hard, especially considering the large number of complaints that they're receiving. But it's a mixed bag because obviously they're receiving a very large number of complaints. And that is part of the problem. And it does raise some questions for me that I'd like to know is what are the financial costs of all the upheld complaints? Because actually when you tot them up, the figure's about 26,000, but actually a lot of the figures of the for settling the complaint aren't put there. It sort of says additional action taken or a sum is paid. Every time we settle a complaint, certainly at tribunal level, we've paid a lot of money to get there already. That is a sunk cost that actually could have potentially fix the problem upstream. So I would suggest to Councillor Francis and Councillor Townsend, because this is obviously mainly in adult social care and SCND, they're the main drivers, we're going to need to do a lot of body of work as a council to try and get upstream of that. What are the issues? Where are we going wrong? How do we fix them? Because it would be much more efficient to spend the money we're currently paying on upheld complaints, even at stage 1 or 2 complaints to the council, or even to get to the tribunal. It would be much better to spend the money fixing the issue there than have to pay it in compensation at the end. And we sort of say this each and every year. It's actually probably one of the few things that unites us as a council, so we do need to get ahead of it. So although I welcome the report, I thank the staff. There is a body of work that needs to be done, so we're not paying money out for settling complaints, rather we're trying to fix them at source. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That concludes agenda item 8. Agenda item 9 is revision of procurement and contract management rules. I'd like to call on Councillor Tony Dyer to move the report as the chair of the Strategy and Resources Policy Committee.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I move the report which asks Council to approve the revised procurement and contract management rules and to authorise the Director of Finance, in consultation with the Director of Legal and Democratic Services, to undertake any necessary updates or amendments to the rules to reflect changes in the law or to correct errors, and to approve any necessary procedural notes to support those rules. Procurement and contract management is an often overlooked but vital element in providing reassurance to us as councillors about how the council purchases goods and services in a way that also supports other key policies, such as commitment to adding social value, delivering to our health and sustainability goals, and many others. We may, at some point in the future, need to review our procurement rules in more detail to ensure that they are compatible with the future objectives, not just of this council, but also how this council is able to work with the new government's objectives as well. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much. So I'd now like to call on Councillor Caroline Gooch to second the report as Vice Chair of the Strategy and Resources Policy Committee. Thank you.
Lord Mayor and fellow members, the Lib Dem group welcomes this motion updating the procurement and contract management rules to comply with new legislation, update references, clarify ambiguities and improve clarity for ease of reading. It is imperative that Bristol City Council remains compliant with legislation, and equally important that the Council operates transparently and fairly. We welcome the clarifications of minor ambiguities and the stress on integrity and social value. There is concern that the Procurement Act 2023 will, over time, stretch staff capacity with the additional administrative requirements. Therefore, the Council must routinely check that our administrative resources are sufficient. It's very good to see the Quick Start flowchart to 8 staff and the procurement options table, which is very helpful. I second the motion and urge members to vote for the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now I'd like to call on Councillor Heather Mack to speak on behalf of the Green Group.
So thank you, Lord Mayor. So this report does have a whole load of lovely flowcharts and tables. So if you've not engaged in procurement rules before, and accessible to look at. I don't want to be pessimistic about how many members in this room will have read this cover to cover, but I've actually decided to stand up and pick out some of the really key things that we all need to know about procurement. And I hope that's a helpful use of this bit of time. Very specifically, I wanted to talk about the responsibilities different members have. So Strategy and Resources Committee will make strategic decisions about procurement. All of the relevant committees will be involved in making key decisions about procurement. And importantly, all councillors should know that you are not permitted to form a part of the process once a procurement exercise is active, and ensure that your actions do not compromise or impact due process around procurement. Helpful reminder for everyone, because this is a constant thing that's ongoing, procuring services and goods all over the place. I just want to quickly mention the principles of our procurement. Who's buzzing? So the key principles for our procurement are best value, good financial governance, effective decision making, transparency, integrity and fairness, hopefully nothing to question there and all the things that we would hope to see there. I also want to make a few comments about the importance of procurement, the goods and services we procure and why it's so essential. So it's a really significant proportion of our overall budget. We procure social care, a lot of that is procured. The majority really of our work is around procurement. Value for money will also obviously be forefront in our mind when we talk about procurement, but the social value within our procurement has a massive impact across the city. Our procurement framework is good and it's generous. It's something that I agree with, that we have a 20% of the score is for social value, which is more than the minimum. It's more than many other councils do. So that is absolutely brilliant and I support that. And I'm proud of it. Now I'm keen to look at that 20%, look at this extraordinary amount of value that our partners, that our providers, contractors around the city are providing, and look at, are the things that are being provided, are they answering to those local communities? Are they the right solutions to the problems being faced in the local communities? And also as a city as a whole. So this is a piece of work that's happening. We are getting a whole amount of value, and is it the value that we need? So I think some of the possibility around procurement and social value is really exciting. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sir Logan to speak on behalf of the group.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. This is literally as exciting as procurement gets. And I'm overwhelmed that you found it almost as exciting as I have. I'm astonished at the leader's allegation that sometimes procurement gets overlooked. This is our opportunity not to do that. This is actually the biggest change in procurement ever. It's certainly the biggest change. Anyone who's blessed to work in the procurement profession can completely know that this is the biggest change, certainly in my professional lifetime. I think it's actually the biggest change in procurement since the end of rationing in the 1950s. And there are two big reasons why I think that, and you should be aware of it. But partly it's about flexibility, and secondly it's about transparency and disclosure. There are huge improvements in flexibility. So we will be able to design our own procedures in our own way for the first time. We will be able to negotiate with suppliers during a procurement process for the first time since 2006. And that's a fantastic thing, and we need to use that opportunity. We will have greater opportunity to expand on this council's good practice in social value. We'll be able to do that more. On transparency and disclosure, people will be aware that usually in most processes we publish two notices. We publish a notice at the beginning of a tender and one at the end to see who the winner is. In most cases we will publish 13 in the future, and this being a local government burden from the previous government, there is no money to provide that burden. It is quite administratively difficult compared to what we have at the moment. And secondly, we will have to put quite a lot of information in the public domain that isn't in the public domain now. If the contract is worth more than £5 million, we will have to publish the contract with a level of redaction for commercially sensitive information that I know every member and many members of the public gallery will find entertaining. If we will also have to publish 3 key performance indicators about how that contract is actually doing over the life of the contract, not just the life of the tender process. So procurement has never been so exciting. And I look forward to working with colleagues across this House to make it even more exciting and even more recognised. The tricky thing is getting compliance with that issue. I think the central team that we have, the people who've put this document together, have done a good job in doing that. The charts are as good as Heather is saying, and better than most authorities have, so we're in a good place. I like that. The hard thing is compliance with it. I would say that, as a member of the Audit Committee, the level of non-compliance with the rules is still poor. It's improved over the last couple of years, so it's no longer catastrophically poor, it's just not as good as it needs to be. So the issue of how to do this better, and the new rules are more difficult to comply with than the current rules. So that is going to be more difficult to do. So we will all need to work together to get that, to share the love and excitement of procurement throughout the organisation. That's I can feel beating in this in this hall today. I thank you very much, and we will absolutely be supporting the new rules.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Logan, for making a speech on procurement so interesting. Thank you. And finally, Councillor John Galandris to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I've never known quite so exciting. I mean, I looked at that report and it seemed a bit dry. So thank you very much, Councillor Logan. It was absolutely brilliant. That's fantastic. That really is good. It's a tricky area, procurement, because there's a dilemma here. On the one hand, this is public money, and the taxpayers expect every last penny to be looked at and scrutinised really carefully, particularly when it involves large contracts. And of course, the history of procurement in the public sector has not been ideal. We could make that very exciting, but it might be defamatory, so I better be very careful what I say about that. On the other hand, there is the pragmatist in me, which sort of says that actually, at the lower end, when we look at smaller contracts, it can be quite bureaucratic, and there's quite a process to follow. So in the private sector, large contracts clearly follow rules that are not that dissimilar from the public sector, to be fair, but there is more discretion at the bottom end. And I just wonder whether at the bottom end we need a little bit more give. But anyhow, these are rules that are being handed down to us largely. We need to follow them. We will follow them. And on this side of the House, we will be supporting this report. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you. So there will now be an aye nay vote. The recommendation is shown on the screen and is on the report in your agenda pack. So all those in favour say aye. Aye. All against say nay. So the recommendation is approved. Thank you very much, everyone. Apologies to the Green Group. I know you've got some chips waiting, but I think I'd just like to get on with the agenda item number 10, and then we'll have a break. So we'll do it as quickly as possible. Agenda item 10 is the Treasury Management Annual Report 2023 to 24. This report is for noting, and I'd like to call on Councillor Tony Dyer to remove the report as Chair of the Strategy and Resources Policy Committee.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And as chips are waiting, I'll try to speak as quickly as possible. And also I'll try to keep the level of excitement, because we're now on to the equally exciting topic of Treasury management. Lord Mayor, the Treasury Management Annual Report is a regulatory requirement that 4 councillors must consider each year. This particular report is looking at 23-24, and members who are on audit will have the joy of looking forward to another report that will be coming to audit in the very near future, looking at 24-25. Treasury management is heavily regulated through legislation and codes of practice due to the numerous risks associated with investments and borrowings. In summary, the Treasury activities and Treasury indicators were in accordance with the authority's strategy and government regulations. A couple of key points I'll pick out is that the Council has a medium-term borrowing requirement of 641 million, predominantly in relation to the borrowing needed to support the financing of the capital programme. The Council have a policy of deferring borrowing wherever possible while it has adequate Treasury balances. As a result, it only needed to borrow 50 million short-term. This course of action minimises the net financing costs of the authority while also reducing the Council's exposure to counterparty risk. Long-term debt as of the 31st of March of 2024 was just under 500 million, with an average annual interest rate of 4.46%. And I should say that the Council's debt is made up mainly of Public Works Loan Board loans, but there are also some market loans, of which 70 million are LOBOs, but I am assured that they are vanilla LOBOs and not the type that have caused problems for local authorities previously. My Lord Mayor, the Council's investment priorities, in accordance with investment guidance from governments and codes of practice, is security first, liquidity second, and then yield. Investments are mainly invested in highly rated money market funds, other local authorities, the Debt Management Office, and highly rated UK banks, demonstrating a low appetite for risk through no investment is totally without risk. And what I would say, Lord Mayor, this is one area of investment where we do have direct input as a council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Councillor Patrick McAllister to speak on behalf of the Green Group, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. To deliver a speech on behalf of Councillor Malik, who due to family reasons cannot be here tonight. As Chair of the Finance Committee, I rise to speak on the Treasury Management Annual Report for 2023-2024. This report reflects the Council's financial approach amidst a difficult economic environment characterised by high inflation and volatile interest rates. Despite these challenges, the Council has met its statutory obligations and managed risks effectively. The report shows that our long-term debt stands at £495 million, with an average interest rate of 4.46%. Meanwhile, our investments total £68 million, achieving a return of 5%. This demonstrates a balanced approach with efforts to defer borrowing when possible, leveraging our cash reserves to minimise costs and maintain financial flexibility. With a medium-term borrowing need of £641 million to support the capital programme through 2028, there are significant demands on our budget. The final capital expenditure for the year was £237 million, funded through a careful mix of grants, receipts and prudent borrowing. It's crucial that we continue to scrutinise these financial decisions to ensure they align with the long-term interests of our city. Our investment strategy remains focused on security, liquidity and yield, prioritising the protection of council assets while aiming for reasonable returns. This cautious approach is vital given the ongoing financial uncertainties. In closing, while this administration has managed well under the circumstances, it is imperative that we maintain strong oversight and transparency in our financial practices to ensure a sustainable future for Bristol. Thank you.
Thank you very much. To speak on behalf of the Labour Group, please.
I'll attempt to keep this relatively brief, partially for the chips and partially because others have covered much of what I would already say. I know council colleagues and the wider public also do not necessarily want me to spend 3 minutes on acronyms, risk assessment and various financial minutiae, let alone explaining debt refinancing, with the possible exception of Councillor Logan. So I'll give a bit of an overview. From my work on the Audit Committee and consulting with colleagues on the Finance Subcommittee, I am very satisfied with the report as given in the agenda. I believe the officers should be commended on helping us ensure that we are compliant both with our statutory obligations and regulations and with our approach to security. It's clear that our investments have been carried out with considerable care and have been invested in the right way. I will touch briefly on why we are struggling in some of these areas of borrowing, why there is these financial pressures. Our biggest overspend comes from children's placements, particularly out-of-area placements, adult social care and temporary accommodation. I think we need to face that these are not quick nor easy issues to resolve. I don't claim to have all the answers on them either, and I hope that we can come to a cross-party consensus on how to push forward. That the situation is this dire is, I think, a reflection of our national circumstances and the relentless budget cuts the council has suffered as much as anything else. I hope I'm not misquoting Councillor Dyer. I've liked the phrase a mouldy satsuma when it came to the state of our finances. We've had plenty of comments already seeking to tie these problems to the previous administration instead of acknowledging these circumstances. Instead of acknowledging that our finances as a country have been, as politely as I can put it, mismanaged. And we do not have the funding that we would like. It cannot be guaranteed while being fiscally responsible both on a national and local level, unfortunate though that may be. To that effect, I would like to offer a word of warning on future mismanagement of our finances. We've seen a persistent pattern within the committee system that attempts to balance the books with decisions that lead to a reduction in revenue and to weaker day-to-day finances. Without due consideration of these issues, we risk moving towards a short-term view that is accompanied by a bad tendency to delay and to dither, to kick problems further down the road. If the council is to maintain its financial health, it must ensure it is building up and making sensible investments. Relying overmuch on, to give one example, selling off and privatising assets like the Bottle Yard Studios is an inherently self-defeating strategy. I'm pleased that many councillors appear to be taking the financial situation seriously. It can be clearly seen that we are not in the best position. But it can be fixed if we are careful and we are willing to make prudent decisions, and I hope that colleagues across all parties will be willing to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Brown, please, for the Liberal Democrat Group.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. Now, there are many things we can blame the former government for, and for which I hope that the new government can improve things for local government. But this Treasury report is the last relating to Labour's term in power in the city. And as such, represents their legacy to our finances and our inheritance as councillors in the committee system. And what do we find? Well, we find the spectre of Bristol Energy and the council's contributions to the Bristol Beacon project looming large in this report. Rather than just looking back at my speeches on this subject over recent years, I've actually looked back at the previous reports as well to see how things have changed in the years since I've been in this chamber. Since 2021, the net debt position has risen from 244 million to 427 million. And if we look at the whole term of the previous mayor, it's gone up from 271 million to that 427 million figure. That's a 57% rise and equates at the current weighted interest rate to £8 million per year of additional revenue that is being spent on interest servicing our debt rather than on services. At a time when the in-year pressures are around 18 million and servicing long-term debt at an average of £4.46% per annum, that costs us 22 million. That's 42% of the budget gap that we're looking at for next year. This is in part a result of kicking the can down the road. So just what could we do with some of that? Well, had we not invested so much in Bristol Energy, we could be looking at investing more in adult social care. Had the beacon costs not escalated as much as they had, we could have been spending more on SEND services. So as we move into the budget setting process, this is an important and timely report. And when residents question us about the difficult decisions we will collectively have to make, we will be able to point to this report and say, this is the position we've inherited, a national funding settlement that leaves us ever more reliant on council tax and a 57% increase in our debt over the past 8 years. So the previous mayor, he often spoke about hard choices. This report outlines just how much harder those choices are going to be now, thanks to those that have already been made.
Thank you very much. Finally, Councillor Michelet to speak on group.
Similar to Councillor McCallum on behalf of Councillor Hucker. Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I have the pleasure in commenting on the Treasury Management Annual Report for this year. During this period, borrowing, excluding PFI and service contracts, increased by 50 million. This was drawn on a relatively short-term basis from the PWLB, so will need to be refinanced this year. This appears to be a sensible approach given the expected course of interest rates. However, any new finance will now be more expensive following the increase in gilt yields arising from the Chancellor's annual budget, as the PWLB loan rates are based in gilt yields. The historic borrowing of 446 million are at fixed rates, so the Council is not exposed to interest rate instability on this debt. At 109 million, the outstanding finance on PFI and service contracts remains a significant liability for the Council. The 2022 to 27 Treasury strategy identified a net medium-term borrowing requirement of 641 million to support the CapEx programme. Of this, 65 million was originally planned to be borrowed in 2022/3 and 100 million in 2022/3. This has now been reprofiled, given that the £65 million forecast for 2022/3 was not actually required. Of the 100 million expected to be borrowed in 2023/4, only 50 million was actually drawn, and this would not have been required at all if it was not for the overspend of the disastrous Bristol Beacon refurbishment project. Such material differences does indicate issues with the Council's financial forecasting and or its capital project management capabilities. Slippage remains in the delivery of the capital programme, but not to the same extent as in previous years. In 2023/4, the capital budget was 298 million, compared with an actual outturn of 237 million. Historically, the Council has pre-funded the CapEx programme and then not delivered it. For a number of years, the Council held very substantial surplus cash balances. It is apparent that the Council had borrowed and paid interest on hundreds of millions of pounds when this could have been deferred. For Treasury investments, the Council prioritises security and liquidity over yield, and I agree with this approach. The return broadly aligns with the benchmark Sterling Overnight Index average rate. This is satisfactory. I am reassured that the Council invests its surplus cash into high-quality, low-risk counterparties. I would like to see the report contain a table of loans to Council subsidiary companies showing the amounts advanced, repaid and impaired. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much. And that concludes agenda item 10. There will now be an adjournment for 20 minutes. Refreshments for councillors in rooms along the corridor and the conference hall is also available. We'll restart the meeting at 8:21, please. 8:21. Thank you. ignoring me. Members, in order to hear both motions, we will require a short extension. Are we all happy to stay till about 9 o'clock-ish? Yep. Okay, good. So let's move on then to agenda item 11. Firstly, we've got the golden motion, Save Our Rivers, Stopping the Sewage Scandal. And the motion will be shown on the screen in the room during the proposing speech. This motion has been altered, which means that all groups have agreed to it being changed from its original wording. The altered motion was published today as a supplement to the agenda. And I'd like to ask Councillor Nicholas Coombs of the Liberal Democrats to move the motion, please.
Thank you. I'll start with some background, some explanation. The Trim is a short river that flows through Westbury in my ward. It's less than 5 miles long, but it has a dozen sewage overflows which discharge waste into the river after heavy rainfall. Across half of Bristol, rainwater flows off roofs, roads and driveways into the sewer system. After storms, to prevent sewage from backing up into homes, sewers overflow into rivers like the Trim. So this is how Bristol has one of the worst records for sewage spills in the country. So there's plenty to blame here, obviously, washing over water companies, government regulators, urban planners, and even climate change. Because with heavier and more frequent rainfall caused by climate change, sewer overflows become more likely. Now, in Westbury, a group of concerned local people asked themselves what they could do to clean up the river. Save Water to Save the Trim realised that they could prevent stormwater from reaching the sewers, reducing the frequency and magnitude of overflows. For the last few years, they've been helping local people to install water butts to catch rainfall from their roof, which can then be used to water the garden or just released into the soil after the storm has passed. My colleagues, Stephen Williams, Caroline Gooch, and I met with Save Water to Save the Trim and were inspired by their approach. So today I'm asking the Council, what can we do to reduce pollution in our rivers? It is of course tempting to wash our hands, to say that this is the responsibility of water companies and the government. But if a group of volunteers in Westbury can make a difference, then clearly the Council can too. I think there are 3 branches of action available to us. Actions that we can take unilaterally as a local authority, work with other organisations that we can coordinate through the One City Board, and civic leadership that we can use to influence and inspire others. The motion asks the Environment Committee to study this issue and offers a number of potential actions that the City Council can take. I'm pleased to see in public statements today that both the Bristol Avon Rivers Trust and Wessex Water support and endorse the recommendations. Now, I thought that a task and finish group would be the appropriate way to address the work stream. Councillor Fodor suggests that this can be covered in a report from officers, so I'll leave him, I think, to explain why this doesn't water down the motion. I've accepted the amendment so the Environment Committee can decide how to proceed. The motion also asks that we write to government calling for a new regulator and better enforcement of pollution incidents. After years of blockage, the national government needs to change the way that water companies are run and regulated. The Liberal Democrats, on paddleboards and jet skis, drew attention to water pollution in the recent general election and offer policy solutions to the new government. It's now time for Bristol City Council to play our part in a river of responsibility that runs through national government, water companies, regulators, and even the volunteers installing water butts in Westbury upon Trim.
Thank you very much. And now Councillor Tim Kent will second the motion.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And apologies for glasses, but all caught up with me. When I first entered this chamber, there were no glasses and there was a lot more hair. But that is life. So this motion stems from a simple belief that the levels of pollution in our riverways are simply unacceptable. I think everyone here would agree with that. I think Julian from Wessex Water agreed with that earlier. And thank you very much for coming along. Thank you for making a statement, and thank you for actually staying. That's impressive. So it's good to hear from Wessex Water. And it's good to hear that Wessex Water are developing plans to try to reduce the amount of sewage. That is, and I'm afraid I can't find another suitable word, being dumped into our waterways. But let us also just consider the following. £1 billion investment is great, but Wessex Water has also paid out over £4 billion in dividends over the last 35 years. So just to put that into context, we need to be doing more. So I think it's not unreasonable that we've got a touch upset at the 372,000 hours worth of polluted water that's been pumped into our waterways in 2023. As the statement from Bristol Avon Rivers Trust makes clear, our waterways are the most affected from sewage pollution of any city in the UK. It is not unreasonable that we wish to highlight that issue. So clearly we do need far stronger national regulation. But our motion is not about bashing the water companies, and it's not really about what we can do nationally, but also what we can do here locally. And that means working together with the water companies, with charities such as the Bristol Avon Rivers Trust. And that's what we wanted to do, was to put ideas, get people thinking, and get some action and movement on this issue. Monitoring is clearly an essential thing because we can't see this pollution. That's the thing. It's invisible once it's put into the waterway. It does not stand out. So through rigorous monitoring, we will know more about the problem, and then we can bring more pressure to bear to try to solve that problem. And I think Bristol Avon Rivers Trust and Colin Bathing Group have both made that quite clear in their statements, how essential that is. So I live near the Brislington Brook. I mean, I literally live really near the Brislington Brook. I live right next to a storm overflow outlet. In 2023, this spilled, that's the term used on the website, 59 times for a total of 242 hours discharging sewage into the brook. The brook probably at best is described as a stream. It's not big. Just a tiny waterway that runs through South Bristol but overwhelmed with sewage. This is simply not good enough.
Councillor Kent, can you wrap it up now, please? Thank you.
I will, Lord Mayor. I'm sure you agree with that. I'm sure you agree that it's not good enough, and it's time we started cleaning up our rivers. Please do support the motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We will now hear from speakers on the motion, and first I'd like to ask Councillor Fodor to speak on behalf of the Green Group.
Thanks very much, Lord, and thanks very much of the motion for accepting what was meant to be a friendly and constructive alteration. I think it allows us more flexibility and a sort of practical approach that we can take through the committee, discussing what's already known and working with others. And we do need a clear response from this council for groups like the Conan Bathers, Trim residents and so on, residents by the Froome and Malago as well. They want action on polluted rivers. So in 2020, the last administration and its One City partners did agree the Ecological Emergency Declaration that 100% of Bristol's waterways should have water quality that supports healthy wildlife by 2030. Now that date's getting pretty close, but we're just as far off the clean rivers, unfortunately, so people are rightly frustrated. We know, as you said, partners need to work together and much more action is needed. Alone, we can't solve this. But we haven't always had the right people around the table, like Wessex Water. And thank you very much for attending. I look forward to meeting you again soon to discuss this. And we need the Environment Agency, Ofwat, DEFRA, and those who manage farmland to play their part. In terms of the pollution in the rivers, most enters the city from upstream, and most is due to two things. The continuing failure of the private water companies to tackle sewage spills and storm overflows that we've heard about, and runoff from land management, when farmers spread fertilisers and slurry on land which washes into nearby watercourses and flows downstream through to Bristol and comes through our city. If you mix sewage and fertilisers, there isn't healthy water quality. The Avon swimmers have rightly been upset about this, but the council has to work with others. We can engage, we can promote, we can set a good example, but even designating and testing the water quality in the Avon, for instance, doesn't make it clean. We discussed this with bathers recently, talked to them, heard what they had to say about their data from citizen science, and we want that to be available as evidence if it's compatible. And rogue plumbing connections in the city do send a lot of dirty water down storm drains, and that needs attention, which has now been passed to Wessex Water, who's taken responsibility from that, from the council and others. And our highways cause runoff and pollution. We need to switch to sustainable urban drainage along our roads, and we need to get more water butts in place too. There are already these initiatives and planning policies, so new developments shouldn't cause more problems. We need to enforce that. But we do need massive investment to replace the old systems, the old streets and gullies, with nature-based solutions that can help clean water. The Bristol Avon Catchments Market mechanism will help channel funds into managing upstream land better as well. Just a couple more points. So I chair the One City Environment Board. The trouble is we need government to reform the companies, we need the Secretary of State and the Treasury to use their powers to regulate more effectively. We need the water companies in public ownership preferably as well, so they fund clean-up, not shareholders. The Environment Board can and will do a lot, and I'll be taking this to them, but our committee can first discuss a paper that was drafted a year ago, and unfortunately wasn't acted on at the time.
Okay, you have to wrap it up now, I'm afraid. Thank you very much. If we can move on to the next speaker, please. Thank you. So now let's hear from Councillor King on behalf of the Labour Group.
Thanks to the Liberal Democrat bringing forward a motion of our rivers. As you rightly point out, we've got several wonderful and beloved rivers and waterways flowing through our city, and signalling the importance of responsible stewardship in the wake of woeful neglect is a sentiment the Labour Group is happy to support. This is not just a Bristol issue. Nationally, our rivers, seas and waterways have been suffering from a lack of investment, a lack of care and an abdication of responsibility for years, while people in our communities struggle with rising bills, and that's the first time this has been mentioned, the impact on people's bills. Fortunately, this is a top priority for Labour nationally, who have already begun the work of sector reform by launching the largest water industry review since it was first privatised. The water bill currently working through Parliament has made clear commitments to hold water bosses to account for their impact on both customers, the services they receive, and for their impact on wildlife and the environment. Under this bill, Ofwat, the water regulator, will be given new powers to block companies from paying out bonuses to their execs if they don't clean up their act, and issue severe fines and potentially imprisonment for disregarding the rules. Water companies will be required to publish real-time discharge information on storm overflows, bringing an unprecedented level of transparency, and new customer panels will have the power to hold bosses to account. And finally, producing pollution reduction plans will be mandatory to ensure the severity and frequency of pollution discharge can be monitored and reversed. In summer, I met with the Common Bathers Group, and their commitment to making their local area a healthy place to live is humbling. I'm pleased that a lot of what they are asking for is being worked through by Labour ministers. Principally, transparency, community voice, stronger enforcement and regulation, and commitment to producing the plans and metrics necessary to ensure this stops happening. In the last administration, the Labour administration locally, we were pleased to bring forward an open water swimming pilot in the harbour. We demonstrated that bringing safe and accessible swimming opportunities to the city is in our gift to give. Happily, the scheme is still running, and my hope is that with several parts of the floating harbour regularly testing as good or excellent for water quality, we can bring more of these joyful and invigorating opportunities to other parts of the harbour in the city. The One City goal to have 100% of Bristol's waterways in good health by 2030 has already ensured the relevant partners convene on this issue, and it is great to see a growing programme of SUDs in the city, as well as regional recognition for our flood defences and ecology mitigation projects as a few fruits of this labour. This subgroup used to be attended by our Cabinet members, so I would hope the Chair of the Environment Board has continued to represent us there. It's a little preemptive to call for Ofwat to be replaced, considering these new regulatory powers. We need to see what difference that makes, and it would be prudent to wait the outcomes of the Review Commission, which will report back next year. Perhaps more in the remit of the Council would be a motion for us to prioritise the production of a green and blue infrastructure strategy, which is needed at pace as a companion piece to our local plan to help us support, protect and invest in our precious ecosystem. The Environment Committee's agenda has been a bit light of late, so there is certainly room to bring more to this agenda. Our rivers and waterways should be clean, healthy and rich in nature, good for people and good for the environment. And as we're seeing nationally, this is the difference a Labour government can make. Thank you.
Thank you. And now Councillor Morris, the Conservative Group. Councillor Morris, please.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Sewage in our rivers is unacceptable. We should all be tackling storm overflow, protecting public health and the environment from discharges. And it's good to hear that there seems to be a lot of support for that tonight. Progress has been taken in the past few years to address storm overflows. This includes the launching of the Storm Overflows Discharge Reduction Plan in August 22 and setting out stringent targets to protect people and the environment. This was backed up by a multi-billion capital investment. Through the Environment Act 2021, the legally binding plan prioritises storm overflows that could cause the most harm while balancing the impact on consumer bills. Water companies have been issued tightened permits for storm overflows to ensure they deliver the targets of this plan. Water companies must increase their network capacity and treat sewage before discharge, while simultaneously significantly reducing all discharges. Ofwat needs to be monitoring and enforcing this work. Earlier this year, in March, the last government introduced a fast-track investment of 180 million over 12 months, which is expected to prevent more than 8,000 sewage spills polluting English waterways. It's not enough, but it's a start, and will be delivered by April 25. Ofwat, they should be working with the water industry to ensure the provision of adequate water and sewage for the country, rather than hindering them. The new government has introduced its Water Special Measures Bill, which does rehash measures already implemented under the last government, such as banning bonuses for water company bosses whose companies already commit serious breaches. In reality, this should be happening already. It is possible it is not being enforced, which reinforces the view that Ofwat may not be fit for purpose. So I welcome the desire to work with local groups and interested parties, as well as the key organisations and government bodies, to share ideas and come up with solutions. The Conservative Group supports this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Coombs has moved the motion. Would you like to respond?
Thank you. And speakers, Councillors Kent, Fodor, King and Morris, for your support for this. We've had a variety of perspectives on the work and efficacy of the previous and current government, and some different approaches to water company ownership. I didn't include in the motion that public benefit companies are the obvious solution to this, because while Liberal Democrat policy, I wanted to get cross-party support for this motion, and I appreciate having received that. Now, we've heard about the ecological emergency and the 2030 target to clean up our rivers. We've heard about land management, the importance of testing water quality, and the impact on customer bills, all of which can fit onto the apparently empty schedule of the Environment Committee as they research the work. I think this cross-party support is driven by greater environmental awareness. More people are seeking to use rivers and seas for leisure, including me, especially during the COVID times when we were all trying to get access to the open environment. And with that, we have, of course, had those statements in support from the Common Bathers, the Bristol Avon Rivers Trust, and even Wessex Water. So thank you to them also for participating in this process. And now it seems like we're going to have a successful motion, so I'll hand over to the Environment Committee to take this a little bit further down the pipes.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so we move to the vote. This will be an e-vote. Please ensure you're in your allocated seat so that your vote is recorded accurately. And you are voting on the motion, and the vote will be open for 15 seconds. Please vote now. Thank you very much, everyone. So the results are 57 for, 0 against and 0 abstentions. So the motion has been carried. Congratulations, everyone. Okay, let's speedily move on to the next agenda item, which is a silver motion, Safe Travel Home for Night Economy Workers. The motion will be shown on the screen in the room during the proposing speech. This motion has also been altered, which means that all groups have agreed to it being changed from its original wording, and the altered motion was published today as a supplement to the agenda. I'd like to ask Councillor Cowself of the Labour Group to move the motion.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The nighttime economy incorporates all businesses who operate between 6 a.m. and 6 a.m. Over 116,000 people work at night in Bristol. This is 41% of the city's jobs. For those that work in the daytime, there are options to get to work that are safe and convenient, including bus services that operate 4 or 5 times an hour at peak times. But for those starting or finishing after 10 p.m, it is often the case that limited or no bus service exists to get them home. Less than 10 night bus services operate between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m, and they tend to be hourly. Even if there is a bus, there's the issue of safety for workers getting home, especially female employees. This motion was motivated by an incident that occurred in 2021 where a Unite member was sexually assaulted on her way home from work after midnight. She'd been asked by her manager to work until 1 a.m. and was promised paid transport home because the last bus was at midnight. An hour before her shift ended, her manager told her she could finish earlier to catch the last bus home. For whatever reason, the last bus never arrived. Left to travel home alone late at night, she was then sexually assaulted. Now I know that if I'm standing at a bus stop at 2 p.m. to come to a council meeting, I feel safer than I do waiting at a stop at the centre after 9 p.m. And I know from my own experience that a bus which doesn't arrive on time at 11:30 p.m, or possibly not at all, can be a very scary experience. Improving our bus service to make sure that travel on the buses is safe, especially for women, is an imperative. That includes the waiting time at the stop, where reliable information that the bus is due can make a huge difference. With the new Labour government announcing a Better Buses bill, there are opportunities for us to make buses work for people, not for profit, in the future. This includes possibly municipal ownership of buses with improved nighttime provision. I note also that rental e-scooters and bikes stop operating between midnight and 6 a.m. I'd suggest that this is something that we as a council might have a view on and want to change. And I know the importance of ensuring our private hire and hackney carriages are safe for all our citizens. Taxi drivers are vetted and held to high standards. Vehicles have to meet the regulations we specify. Those using on-demand private hire taxis need to know that we are upholding those standards. A good employer looks after their employees beyond working hours, and in my opinion should consider the risks involved in travel to and from work. Of course, for some businesses, paying for travel to and from work may be financially difficult. Indeed, it can be reasonably argued that travel to work is not something they should pay. I accept that. But at the very least, mitigating the risk should be standard policy, even if such mitigation is for employers to check in on their employees as they travel home. I thank Annie McGann for a public statement and note the good work being done by those who advocate for the nighttime economy, and I also note the good work of Carly Heath, including the Women's Safety Charter. So I urge members to support this motion, and I thank you for listening.
Thank you. Councillor Collar will second the motion.
I'm choosing to second this motion because I actually believe it's really important. I have daughters who work in this industry, evening and retail and hospitality. I also work with young girls who also work in these same industries. They all finish work late at night, finishing after 10 p.m. Some of them are lucky enough to only get one bus. Others have to get two. Some of them, including my daughter, has to get a bus across one side of town, walk up through town, and then get a bus to where she lives. Oh, sorry. They all travel using public transport, which can be unreliable and unsafe, as Kaz has said. They are at risk from all sorts of adverse situations, including harassment, catcalling, and potential physical or sexual assault. Unfortunately, this does not just occur in our streets. They also occur on our buses and even in taxis. This motion raises the issue and gives us the green light to pursue reasonable discussions and possible options to keep them safe. I firmly believe that opening a dialogue and having good people, everybody here, looking for a solution to this issue, and that it is a step in the right direction. You might ask, who is responsible for fixing this solution? We all are. Where do we start? As is the case with any other motions that my Labour colleagues have recently brought forward, we want it to be the start of a conversation. A few things that we can do while showing the 41% of Bristolians who work in the nighttime economy that we care. A publicly owned bus company would mean that we, as councillors, could directly improve the standards and safety of buses and offer more night buses to allow them to get home safely. Young girls and women, especially, wanting to earn a wage, seek a better living standard and have independence, they shouldn't have to worry about their safety when getting home from their work. We see this in the lack of security in shops, lone workers, and most importantly, the travel after these shifts have been completed. Travel home safely should not be a game of chance. It should be a guarantee. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now hear from speakers on the motion. Firstly, Councillor Stafford Townsend speak on behalf of the Green Group.
I've been drafted in instead.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
So first and foremost, thank you very much for bringing this motion, and thank you for the real-life experience and stories that we've just heard. A really important reminder of how important this is. We accept that 40% of the workforce in Bristol is nighttime economy, and they're often women and often underpaid. We accept that there's limited transport options for them to get home, and like it should be a guarantee, not a game of chance. There are very few night buses. A few years ago, First Bus was running night buses through the night because they had so many buses they couldn't fit them in the depot. And that's not happening anymore because of the pandemic, although things are getting back to that sort of level. And we know that, face no e-scooters and a higher level of danger and antisocial behaviour because of the alcohol-fuelled, particularly city centre economy. And whilst too many employers don't think of the wider picture, and health and safety is too often something that ends at the doorstep, I think we have to be really careful about this. There's no simple solutions, and we need to look at the options for encouraging employers and to take a wider view. And we do need to accept that this needs to be something that needs to be considered by the relevant committee and take an emergent approach. But we will be supporting this in the spirit of the overall motion. And I think it's absolutely right that you described it as the start of a conversation, which is, I think, a really good way to think about this. So, in terms of public transport, there are no cuts planned to the supported service budget. But as we know from the Task and Finish group, which Kaz and Tim has been chairing, and Kaz has been a very active participant in, the money we've got over the next few years won't go far. And night buses are one of our many priorities. But we're going to have some difficult decisions with the 4.7 million we've got over 3 years to identify what our priorities are. We think that taxi licensing needs to be improved. Some of our standards are very high, but not necessarily as smart as they could be. But they're being eroded by other councils letting particularly private hire through far too easily. I've had a conversation about how we protect the public with my opposite number in South Gloucestershire, and they accept that they need to make sure that things like checking that the drivers even have insurance is important. Uber says there's not a clear relationship between high standards and good feedback on their app, but I don't think that's the best measure. We should be enforcing and expecting high standards. And I think the overall laws on street trading and licensing of street traders desperately need to be updated. We're long past the time when it's currently defined as actually money exchanging hands on the street, and we're way beyond that now with Uber and micro-mobility and so on. So we really need a government to start taking responsibility for raising the standards, not a race to the bottom between authorities, and for making sure that it's not about money being exchanged on the street. And lastly, I really look forward to the new Labour government giving us some much more clarity about what franchising looks like, because we desperately need to get on with it, and we've had dither and delay. And finally, I was quite pleased to see this change because It did say oppose all cuts to bus services, and unfortunately the bus cap is a national cut to bus services. So the Labour Party, I think we've saved them from themselves by changing this motion, and I really hope that Dan Morris can do something to use the bus service improvement money or other money to make sure that we maintain £2 fare cap. Thank you very much.
Councillor Clark, half of the Labour Group, please.
Thank you. I'm supporting this motion because I want every woman in Bristol to be able to get home safe. As Kaz mentioned, the Get Me Home Safe campaign started after a Unite activist was sexually assaulted on her way home from work after her bus failed to show up. In Bristol, we have over 50,000 women working in the nighttime economy, many of them working in health and social services and the leisure and culture sectors. Every woman in our city should be able to get home safe and without fear. I want to give you a couple of stats. 57% of women say that they do not feel safe using public transport, and 84% of women say they feel unsafe waiting for a bus after dark. As a woman in Bristol, these stats don't come as a surprise to me. Now, my experience is that often, when we as women say something makes us feel unsafe, the response we get is that we're wrong. We get presented with evidence as to why the stats show that it's extremely unlikely for something horrific to happen on our way home from work. Now, I hope it goes without saying that keeping people safe should always be priority number one. But what that response says is that feeling unsafe doesn't really matter. It says the fact that tonight thousands of women in Bristol will feel anxious and on edge on their way home doesn't matter. So to the councillors in this room, I have two asks. First, when developing policy, don't dismiss evidence about the perception of safety. And second, commit to drive change so that everyone is able to get home safe and without fear. Thanks.
Thank you. Williams to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm very grateful for the Labour Group bringing this important motion to us. I think they've done all of us a favour by bringing this forward. I'd like to thank Kaz, Susan and Emily for the contributions they've made to bring the motion to life. For me, as Chair of the Public Health and Communities Committee, it's actually quite a timely point to consider this motion, because at our next committee meeting on a week Friday, our main item of business is actually called The City at Night. It's the annual report of the Director of Public Health, which will be published as a committee paper tomorrow. And I really do urge all of us to read it. It's a very readable and digestible report, and some of the statistics that have been mentioned already are in it, and there's a lot more as well. As Kaz was saying when she introduced the motion, 116,000 people work at night, 41% of the working age population. When I first read that, I thought, surely that can't be true. It just doesn't ring true. But when you think it through, we have two huge hospitals in our city. We have an enormous hospitality network, all the hotels, the restaurants, the theatres, music venues, for which Bristol is world renowned for as well. All of that only happens because a lot of people work either late into the night or indeed through all of the night. Then you think of all of the people in Avonmouth, all those distribution warehouses, all those people getting the packages ready that get delivered to our door during the day. So a huge number of people are essential to our economy and the way we live our life at the moment. And 44% of those people who work at night are women. So it is really important for the issues that the three Labour speakers identified, that women feel able to safely go to work and get home again, either late at night or very early in the morning. If I turn now to the resolutions that are actually asked for in the motion, one of them is for the Licensing Committee to consider this in the future. This is timely as well because the Licensing Committee, Councillor Breckles, myself, Councillor Eddy and Councillor Poultney are actually just starting a review of licensing policy, and a report will come to full council next year. I've already urged officers to look at the City at Night report from the Director of Public Health, and when this motion is passed, which I'm sure it will be, Lord Mayor, that will inform our work as well. So it really could actually make a big difference. The motion did call for opposing cuts in public transport. We've heard laudable statements about the Labour budget. One of the most retrograde things in it was freezing fuel duty, while at the same time increasing by 50% bus fares. I hope our current Metro Mayor may actually consider using resources available to him to reverse that. We prefer, Liberal Democrats prefer, and I think the Labour group does as well, to have franchise instead of public control. But as others said, this is the start of a conversation. We really welcome this motion, and we can all work together to make sure that people who are working and indeed playing and enjoying themselves at night can do so safely.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And now Councillor Eddy to speak on behalf of the group.
Mayor, Councillor Self is to be congratulated for tabling this motion and putting on the agenda the importance of the nighttime economy, and also keenly the importance of ensuring safe transport home for the people who work in it. Unfortunately, that's a essential part of my speech. The rest is downhill from now on. Like the annual pay policy, my group actually support 98% of the words in this motion and the action points, but we disagree with 2%, and those sadly are actually key for us. We maintain that Councillor South's request to the Licensing Committee must have the following words appended to it: as far as is reasonable, lawful, and serves to promote the key objectives of the Licensing Act. This is because licensing officers have advised me that the request is presently couched, frankly, risk imperiling the proposal's clear intention. Even advisory changes require local licensing authorities to consult prior to proposing changes. Our second difficulty relates to the pledge to support calls for the municipal ownership of buses, and I appreciate in the revised automation this has been changed to the words in public control. But frankly, they're very similar. Even dinosaurs, to quote Councillor Reynolds, such as myself, cannot remember the time when Bristol ran its own fleet of buses. However, those are plenty of people who can remember it. And frankly, the buses in this city will run far worse than actually under a private monopoly, which is what we have now with First Group. Why to opt publicly for this film model would, in my view, be destined for disaster, almost as if the council was setting up its own energy company. Oh, I forgot, Lord Mayor, of course, we have already tried that and didn't attend well. No doubt, of course, in our current financial situation, we can afford to burn another 55 million quid of council taxpayers' money.
Councillor Eddy, if you could wrap up now, please.
There are several alternatives to public ownership, and I urge members not to recklessly sign off to this broken model and keep your options open at this point. In these circumstances, we will be reluctantly voting against this motion.
Thank you very much. Councillor Self, as mover of the motion, would you like to respond?
Well, I'd like to thank all the members that spoke on the motion, and in particular I'd like to thank those parties that made alterations. They're much appreciated. And I really appreciate the support from the Green Party and the Lib Dems. They were very positive comments. I was hoping to end the meeting with a cross-party love-in, but I fear that perhaps the Tory party might not be with me on that one. I'm sure it'll be a close one. Sometime in the future, maybe, Mark, we can have that conversation, but thanks to Rachel Reeves, we've got and Louise Haig, we've got £1 billion being invested in buses to deliver reliable bus services and protecting routes. And to just rebut one of the points made by the Tory speaker, I note that under the Tory government in this city, the number of bus trips per hour in Bristol reduced by 40% from 2010 to 2023. So I think there's more to be done on the buses, and I'm looking forward to this being the start of a conversation, and let's move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so vote, and once again, vote, please make sure your allocated seats that your vote is recorded accurately. You're voting on the motion, and the vote will be open for 15 seconds. Please vote now. So the results are in. So 51 for, 6 against, and 0 abstentions. So that motion has also been carried. Many congratulations. So that concludes the silver motion and concludes today's meeting. The next meeting of full council will be held on Tuesday, the 10th of December. Thank you very much.